I'm Dan at vintagefellow.org, and today we are going to be taking a closer look and riding this vintage Gitane RMO team bike. It's from 1992 and was ridden at the Tour de France of that year by French Pro Dante Resse. Very cool looking bike. The frame itself is obviously custom made in Columbus EL, not a tube set you encounter very often. It's an extra thin walled frame set, and the tubes themselves are made from Niverchrome, which is a very hard, very light steel. It tends to make for a very hard ride, very stiff but exceptionally light. We've put it through the scales. It's quite light, but I'm going to be honest, I thought it would be you know, a little bit lighter, under that 20-pound mark. There we go. We'll just have to see how it rides when it's out there. Things of note: this should have a complete Mavic SSC group set on there. It's French at that time loved Mavic. Mavic sponsored so many teams in the pro peloton at the time. You can always tell this very distinctive starfish crank. The crank itself is actually really good. It's over engineered. They wanted to put the bolt heads on the inside so you couldn't see them from the outside, but it's a very stiff crank, and the bottom bracket is also super stiff, so that bit there is really neat. I draw your attention to the good bits because a lot of it is terrible, total rubbish. I'm going to start with the brakes. Now, these, to the trained eye will note, are not Mavic SSC brakes. The reason for that is that Mavic, I mean, can't really just blame Mavic for this. Obviously, at that point, Campagnolo were doing funky stuff with Delta brakes, which didn't work out very well either. But Mavic decided to put the spring that returns the brakes back to their standard position. And they decided to mount it inside. There's a little sprung spring curled up right inside the mechanism. And this was just total rubbish. I'm sure at the time, if you had brand new and professional mechanics, you could probably get it to work. When I got this bike, it came with them on there. And every time you adjusted it, within a minute, it would go back, start rubbing front and back, doing strange things. Yeah, they were just awful. And in my mind, you can't really mess around with brakes. So I swapped them over with some single plane Campagnolo period brakes at the time. They looked very similar. They took me like 9-10 seconds to set up, and they've never gone out of true. Why mess around? Likewise, and again, you know, internet guys, prepare to throw buns at me, whatever. The SSC rear derailleur was also total junk. Now, I persevered with that for about 8 rides. I was constantly adjusting, checking, tweaking, seeing if I could get it to work. This thing's had 3 different chains on there. Basically, it's hang on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 speed. It didn't want to be in the 7th sprocket or the 1st sprocket. It would jump out of them all the time. So really, you were only riding 5 speeds out of the 7 that were available on the rear cassette, and it was clicking all the time, ghost shifting. And on the odd occasion where you did get it absolutely spot on, you just didn't want to change gear because you knew it was going to be just hell to get it to work again properly. So I changed for a period Campagnolo rear derailleur. Fantastic. Again, a few seconds to set up. Brilliant. Just does exactly what you wanted to do. We'll come back on to that kind of stuff shortly. Obviously I kept the original parts so they can always go back on this bike at a later stage. Interestingly, they have got Mavic SSC unbranded shifters, which I believe are an unbranded Simplex copy, which are kind of cool. Simplex retrofiction. Again, the spring, well, it kind of uses an internal dragging spring to create friction. It's not a bad little shifting system up front, actually, to be honest. And the brakes themselves, Mavic brakes, the levers are fantastic. And the headset is also fantastic. So Mavic could make some really good bits, just other bits just will be on them, I think. Cinelli 3T, I think it is, on the 44 centimetre wide bars, 120mm stem as it came. You would expect this with a pro bike. Italia Turbo 2 saddle on the back, very nice, we like that. Mavic seat post, and what else have we got on here? Mavic hubs, and Mavic Mach 2 rims on here. All rides pretty well, to be fair, since I changed out those parts. But enough about this bike now. It's a stunning day. I think we need to get out there and ride. Alright, so we have a fantastic summer's day here on the rural roads of the Vendée in the south of France to put this Gitane through its paces, and we'll see what we have to say about it. Now, I've ridden this bike quite a few times, as I mentioned before, a lot of the time trying to get it set up correctly, and now, as I'm sure you can hear, it's really riding really quietly, really nicely, as it should do, so we can get a bit more feel for what the bike wants to tell us. Now, I'm going to touch briefly on those parts that I swapped out. I just think that persevering with terrible parts is just not worth doing. It really spoils and detracts from the joy that is riding vintage bikes on great roads. Yeah, that's why that's happened, and you know, I would do it again tomorrow without hesitation, but obviously that can all be reversed very, very easily. And it reminds me, one of my favourite books ever written about cycling was Paul Kimmage's Rough Ride. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it as an insider tell-all to what the pro peloton really was like back in the 80s, kind of the glory days of 80s and 90s professional bike riding. And in there, Kimmage himself rides for RMO, and that's kind of cool. So when I saw this bike come up, I just thought, you know, it's he rode with Dante Resse as well, and I thought that's really neat, I'll give that a go. But there was a little passage in Rough Ride where he does comment that sometimes they felt the kit, the equipment that they were given was not quite as good, or was up there with some of the other teams. And yeah, it's worth noting, with the original kit that was on here, the idea of trying to get up Mont Ventoux or Alpe d'Huez would have just been horrendous. So I can see what he meant there. And yeah, I think, well, I know a lot of obviously pro teams were using Mavic at that point, but give me Dura Ace or Campagnolo at that point over this stuff any day of the week. So the more observant of you out there will notice that I'm currently wearing this exceptionally cool period RMO skin suit. RMO gear is really hard to get a hold of, despite the amount of it that was produced, and this is original and fits really well, although there are no pockets in it, so my phone is currently stuffed down the front. So if you see a rather strange looking rectangular object, that is in fact my phone lurking down by my stomach somewhere. So let's talk about this bike a little bit more. Now, it's, as we mentioned, Columbus EL. It's a custom built team bike, so let's put it in the top category. We've got to compare it to other top team bikes of the professional peloton of around that early 90s era. Now, I've been fortunate enough to ride a few of these, notably a recent video, hopefully you've all seen that, of riding Sean Yates's 1990 711 Eddie Merckx Corsa, which is just an exceptional ride. I've also ridden an ex-Gatorade Bianchi TSX team bike, super cool, a slightly later Motorola team bike as well. All of these bikes, they're SLX, TSX, that kind of thing, and this bike has to be compared with its peers, and whilst it's exceptionally good as a road bike, and I think, you know, that weight of about just around that 10 kilo mark sounds a little bit big, a little bit porky. It's because of these oversized tubes. The tube set is very wide, it's very big, The frame itself is not a big frame, but the tubes themselves are quite big. The idea is to make it super stiff for climbing and sprinting. A bit wasted on me, but it does ride very well. Now, does it compare with the Sean Yates bike, the Eddie Merckx Corset XL? No. The Yates bike, be it 2 years older than this one, is just, I would say, a cut above. The frame has got so much more urge to it than this. This is a very, very nice frame. Very easy to ride for long distances, very quick, but it hasn't got quite that same manic urge that Yates bikes has. In terms of just really going for it all out, mad on a stage, going for stage wins, things like that. This is a perfectly good bike in the pro peloton, just not quite at that level. And also, I hate to say it, you know, at that point you've got 7-speed and 8-speed Dura Ace. 1 year after this was built, Dura Ace come out with STIs that we all know and love. Even Campagnolo have got 7-speed index shifting working well by that point. This is still using a rebranded Simplex retrofriction changer, and you know, that was really good in 1982, 1985, but by 1992 it's really just not good enough. You're still feathering gears, you're still making adjustments, you know, people could definitely get away from you while you're messing around. And so yeah, it is really good, but it has flaws, and those flaws do stand out when you compare it to its peers. Okay, been out for about an hour and a half now, and I just remembered this Gitane, the kind of bike that grows on you. The more you ride it, the better it gets. I'm in 5313 at the moment, going down a fairly fast downhill swooper towards the roundabout. Yeah, this is the kind of thing this really excels at. I've forgotten how comfortable the cockpit is. Let me just get around here. Kind of pro style, hang down, back on it, there we go. Yeah, the cockpit's really comfortable. These Mavic brake hoods are very, very nice. You can just while away some time on those. It's really, really good. Got a bit of wind, I'm sure, as you can hear, but we slice it that nicely. And I think, you know, this the Gitane frame itself, made of EL, it is very, very stiff and a bit springy. In fact, it's almost like an aluminium frame. Not quite as springy as Ali, but you know, it's not far behind. And yeah, if all the roads were like this, you could do some serious riding on this thing. Okay, so we've seen on the flat 40-45 kilometers an hour. On the drops, this is quite a machine. But time to see how it goes when we start climbing out of the saddle. Wow, okay. It climbs better out of the saddle by far than in the saddle, which is a bit of a revelation. I don't normally feel good climbing out of the saddle. I like to stay seated, but on this one I think I'll stay out of the saddle some more. That's really quite impressive. So we're drifting in now for a nice little downhill before a finishing climb. A few lumps to get over. we come. And it was our way all along. Okay, that's the end of today's ride. Been out there for a couple of hours now, and it's fair to say that the Gitane got better and better as I got to know the peculiarities of that particular bike. It eats up flat mileage. When you're on the flat roads at 35-40 kilometers an hour, it really works for me down low. That is a great bike to ride, yeah, climbing, get out of the saddle on that one, and again it really rewards. Seated climbing less so, but just the peculiarity of that frame. But it just got better and better as I went. Obviously, yeah, if it wasn't a Mavic equipped bike and that was equipped with full Dura Ace 7400, that would be in a different league. It would be an epic bike. As it is, it's still really good. Now what will be fascinating to consider is the same year that was built, in the RMO team, you could opt to have a carbon fiber TBT 92 in the same colours. And it would be fascinating to see how those two would go up against each other. And it just so happens we're building up at the moment Richard Vironc's 92 TBT 92 RMO team bike, which is a carbon fibre TBT. So it'll be great to see how that team bike goes head to head with this steel team bike from the same team. Although I must point out there's a couple of Dura Ace 7400 parts going in on Vironc's bike just because I really want to ride it. Anyway, I hope you liked that video. I sure enjoyed riding it and making it. Do like and subscribe for more vintage bike riding, builds and anything that's to do with cool bikes. Thanks a lot.